any sort of we mix and match. As your business increases, so might the requirements for additional hardware. Any questions so far? So in addition to all those other bits and bobs, we get a Cisco Catalyst switch. And this is just used as a management switch to connect up to all the ILOMs or components in the compute nodes, the executive storage cells and switches. You don't have to use this. If you want to swap this out because you'll use your existing legacy switches, then you can do that. That's no problem. That's the only thing you can swap. Again, kind of quick diagram that shows you how everything's interconnected in terms of networking. We obviously have the management network connecting the ILOMs up together, and you can access to the PDU modules that are in the rack. Each of the ILOMs of each of the components in there. Obviously there's the InfiniBand network to connect up to give you high-speed performance. And there's also your client connectivity via the 10 gig network. Because otherwise, how are you going to get to it from your business? So one of the reasons, and I'm not a salesperson, I'm not going to sell you things, okay? So I just want to talk about one example that certainly we internally had great experience on. And that's when our beloved leader, Larry, decided that he wanted to migrate off their existing big, super internal Oracle database that runs the company, that runs all our holiday calculations and payroll, etc. And what they did, they decided to move from their 3 M9000 configuration with 2 fully populated EMC arrays to SuperCluster. What they were finding was they were running SunCluster, running SVM OBAN, 3 nodes connected together, and what they found is they didn't have that much spare resource at end quarter. When they looked at the performance stats, the majority of the workload was all IO based. And when it came around to it, Larry didn't want to renew his EMC license, so the decision was made, we've got to move. So as I said, they moved from 3 fully populated M9000s, which are fairly big machines, and they moved to a full rack supercluster, and this is T4 mind you, so I don't know what the figures are. The floor space would be the same, and the power requirements would be very similar. In terms of, they moved from, sorry? No, sorry, for the T4 superclusters and T5, because the T4 full rack still uses 1 rack, the same as the full rack T5 supercluster.
It doesn't take up as much room as 3 M9000.
No, and 2 fully populated EMC arrays. So just some figures that show how much they saved. Mind you, when you're doing this exercise, it's not just about power and floor space, it's about everything else that builds up your costs, so your employees, your licenses, and everything else. So this is just one small portion.
Those M series are pretty decent boxes in the first place, aren't they? So it's not.
Yeah, what they found is that they're running SunCluster, and during busy times, they couldn't afford to lose 1 M9000 in a 3-node cluster, because the rest of the other 2 couldn't cope with the load. So you can imagine the sysadmins of that internally sort of sweating over the keyboard trying to press a button. Oh, I don't want to do that, don't want to do that. We've had colleagues that have been there, and it's a big, well-used system, and yeah, it has strategic importance to Oracle, so they didn't take the decision lightly. But it's certainly a good example. So talking about, there is a paper on this that is widely available if you want to go and read it. But it's a great example of how much time they save by offloading all the I/O to the storage cells. And talking to my colleague, another colleague in Keith and I's team, he was actually involved when the internal folks migrated. the timeline was quite incredible in terms of time to deployment. Let's get the figures right here. So, of course, if you're implementing anything new, I do hope that people start going down development testing. These guys certainly did due to the importance of the platform. So on the 3rd of August last year, their development system arrived, and the 5th they installed it and that's up and running. And it was up and running and doing the dev tests for a month, just shy of a month. And then on the 14th of October the production system arrived. 22nd of October they installed it. 29th of October it was handed over to DBAs. They went into pre-production on the 16th of November and it became a standby. So they then put it in as a fourth node in the 3-node cluster to take the workload. And then on the 16th of December they went live with it. And they migrated the whole lot over. So it was seamless. From our perspective, I know Joy and Keith will say, when we went to do our time card to book our holiday or book our overtime, it was so much quicker. Really, a lot quicker. Another good example of them, the two diagrams show the one on the left with the blue, time waiting for database. So waiting for I/O, waiting for I/O to come back from the EMC storage. And mind you, they had 8 paths down to this. 8 gig final paths down to the storage, but they were just hammering it. And then as they migrated to SuperCluster, it shows you that the compute nodes are doing what they should be doing real work. So quite a nice example. So there was a comment about the old M9000. So migrating to T5-8. But the M8000, you can stick effectively 10 machines workload. You have to leave the building now. So there's just a couple of figures of how many machines you can effectively migrate. And mind you, the internal folks moved to T4, so the figures will be slightly less, but just a great example of why you would want to move to one platform. In terms of, if you work out your cost savings alone from power and floor space requirements, it becomes quite scary, doesn't it? I mean, you look at the old E3000, 247, that's just crazy. I think I'll have to dig out the figures, but who remembers 10Ks? Yeah, I think it's even more than the 3,000 for how many you can fit onto a T4. It amazes me how far we've come in technology, having been at Sun for Oracle for 13 years now. So, you have a multitude of configuration options. So I'm just going to whiz through these, because I think we should go and jump on the machine and show you it itself. So you can slice and dice how you want to do it to meet your business requirements. Database domains, application domains, make use of the Exadata storage cells, make use of the ZFS storage appliance for binaries, etc. But of course, the important factor is in some of these situations where you've got legacy applications, you don't want to spend the time upgrading them and moving them across. You want to move them across as they are. And I think Jared did a presentation on the P2V option for Solaris and using physical machines to zones. So obviously that can be used as part of that migration plan. So lots of different examples. I'll send the slides to you guys if you want to look at them in more detail. And obviously, whilst it may simplify your business by amalgamating, saving money, we do add a little bit of complexity in terms of the layers of virtualization that are happening. Down at the LNOM layer, when we move down into the zones layer, etc., etc. So just showing you one example of the sort of things you can do with these platforms. And obviously the software stack, Solaris 10, 11 for application domains, all the middleware, etc., etc. In terms of clustering, the database domains will always use rack. You don't have to use rack if you don't want to. You can do them single instance, entirely up to you. Obviously that means you must have architected in a failover machine to some, to make sure you've got high availability elsewhere. But the decision is yours. And obviously from a Solaris perspective, you've got a Solaris cluster. Again, what we're talking about from a management perspective, there's Office Center to monitor it. But again, I'll jump onto that in a short while. So, this is a full rack. So remember back to the diagram I showed you about the PCI paths? Each one of the dots is a PCI grid complex. So, in terms of how many configuration options you can go for, that's how many physically you can go down to LDOMs wise. But you have the choice. So for each of these domains, you can choose from an S11 database, an Linux data domain, an S11 application domain, or an S10 application domain. So the world's your oyster really there in terms of flexibility of configuration choices. The only constraint is with where you have more than one domain is it must be either an S11 application domain or an X data domain, which is based off an S11 anyway. You can't use an S10 application domain. That's due to us making use of the latest LDOM software, which doesn't run on S10. But obviously with a half rack, you've got slightly less configuration choices. Any comments or questions so far? Still with me? Still awake?
So you can't LDOM down, if you want to use Solaris 10, you can't LDOM it down the same?
You have to have at least one Solaris level.
Yes.
You can have
For managing the other
management.
So what you could do, and I'll show you in a little while, apologies everything's in a little while, but I think the demo is slightly more exciting. What you could do is effectively go for a two-domain config, create a very thin S11 domain as your primary control domain, and then go for everything else. And yes, you have the option to shift resources into other domains if your domain requires it.
Is it worth mentioning what those three different domains are and what customers do?
I won't go through all these. So these are just showing you for each of the half and full rack configs, different configuration options, and one thing to be aware if you ever did get one of these machines from terms of administration point of view, once you get over a certain number of LDOMs, where we are currently in the configuration choice, all the LDOMs, root disks are based off internal disks. We will move to iSCSI for root disks at some point in the future. But at the moment we're based off using the internal disks. Now it gets slightly, there are some cross-dependencies where we go to more than 3 domains, in that some of the domains become I/O domains, so they will share their disks to other domains. And there is, we have worked it out, there is a bit of cross-dependency, but losing one I/O domain does not mean you lose all root disks within your other domain. Does that make sense? So effectively, you may have one of these 2 domains in here being shared disks from both of these LDOMs. So if that one had to be taken out for maintenance, it may lose one of its, it wouldn't lose one of its mirror disks. One of them would go offline, but you still have the other one being provided from the other domain. There is a specific shutdown and startup sequence for when you get that number of domains to ensure you don't end up with the wrong mirror getting used. So, a multitude of configuration options to choose from. Excuse the insert chart here. That be the presentation software I'm using. So, as I was saying earlier, you can shift resources, and there's a tool that comes with the platform called setCoreMem, which means you can shift the resources. You can't change your PCI root complex layout at all, because it messes with the configuration in terms of being your boot disk provided. And unfortunately, at this point in time, you do need to